Watch this video if you want to learn how to make incredible and easy sourdough pasta with just 4 ingredients. Today I'm sharing one of my absolute favorite things in the world to make, sourdough pasta. It's one of the best uses for your starter or discard, especially when you want something hearty and comforting. It is actually quite simple once you get the hang of it. So today I'm walking you through my process step by step, and I will also make sure to share all the tips that I've learned from making this so many times. You really only need 4 ingredients. 1 cup of sourdough starter or discard, 3 cups of flour, I used unbleached all-purpose flour, 4 eggs, and a ½ teaspoon of salt. That's it. These super basic ingredients make the best dough ever. Depending on your climate, flour type, and even the hydration level of your starter, you may need to add a little extra water or flour. I'll talk more about that and how to know when you've got the texture right in just a minute. First, add the flour into a large bowl and stir in the salt. Then I crack in the eggs and pour in my cup of starter. Sometimes my starter is bubbly and active, sometimes it's just discard from the fridge. Both work beautifully. Though active starter gives you a tiny bit more rise in the dough if you let it rest long enough, but really the eggs are actually the main component here because they give the dough its structure. Start mixing everything together. I use a fork at first to break up the eggs and slowly pull in flour from the sides. Once it gets too thick for the fork, I switch to my hands. You're looking for a dough that really holds together without being sticky. If it feels dry and maybe even crumbly, add water a little bit at a time. Make sure to not just dump a bunch of water in there because then you'll have to even it out with putting flour in. And then the ratio with the eggs and the starter will start to be off. Same goes for the flour. If the dough is too wet or sticky, dust it with a bit more flour a little bit at a time. A tip that I found helpful when I started making pasta dough was don't stress too much about getting it perfect at this stage. You're going to let it rise, and during that rest, the flour will hydrate more fully, and the gluten will start developing. Sourdough pasta is more forgiving and easier than you think. Once the dough is mostly together, I transfer it to a clean surface and knead it for about 8 to 10 minutes, or less if I feel like it's done sooner. It should feel smooth and a little firm, kind of like Play-Doh, but with more elasticity. You're looking for something that springs back a bit when you press into it. Now here's the secret: time. I cover my dough with a clean towel or wrap it in loose plastic wrap, and I just let it sit on the counter for about 8 hours. This is where the sourdough magic really happens though. The dough ferments slowly, the flavor develops, and the texture becomes even better. You could let it sit longer or even refrigerate it overnight, but 8 hours at room temperature works really well. You definitely can make it sooner. You could even cook it right away after making the dough, but I'm telling you right now that it will not be as good. Still be very good and yummy, but it just will not be as good because the fermentation is what gives the noodles that great texture and flavor. After the rest, I shape the pasta. I start by cutting the dough into 4 or 5 equal pieces. Keep whatever you're not working with covered because pasta dough actually does dry out quite quickly if you leave it uncovered. Then I take a piece, flatten it out slightly, and dust it with flour. The more flour, the better usually during this whole process because the flour is what keeps your noodles from sticking together. So whenever your dough feels sticky, dust with more flour so that you don't get any clumps. Now I feed that piece through my KitchenAid pasta roller attachment on the widest setting. If you don't have an attachment for this, I will link a KitchenAid one and manual one in the description. This first roll is about waking up the dough. It will probably be a little rough looking, and that's okay. I fold it in half and roll it through again. I repeat that 1 or 2 or even 3 more times if I think it needs it on the widest setting, always folding in half. This is essentially laminating your dough by building up structure and strengthening the gluten. It's also getting it in correct shape to continue to be fed through the attachment on smaller settings. Once it's smooth and even, I start moving down the thickness settings, 1 step at a time. No skipping. Skipping settings is very tempting, but it can and will tear your dough. So I just go one by one, flouring lightly as needed to prevent sticking. Flouring will also prevent tearing. You'll notice the dough gets longer and longer and more supple as you go. Depending on what kind of pasta you're making, stop at the thickness that you like. I usually go to level 6 or 7 for fettuccine or spaghetti. If I'm doing stuffed pasta like ravioli, I might go even thinner. For today, we are going to do fettuccine, so I'm going to stop at level 7. Once it's at the right thickness, I lay the sheet out and let it dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. Just enough to firm it up a little bit before cutting. I don't always do this, but if I have time, I do because it helps the noodles to keep their structure after going through the attachment. Then I run it through the cutting attachment. As it comes out, I dust it with flour again and toss it gently to separate the strands. Put the noodles into small stacks, floured, as you do the rest of the pieces, starting from the beginning at the widest setting. Once I finish up running all the dough through the attachment so that I have sourdough fettuccine, it is time to cook the pasta. Fresh pasta cooks super fast, so don't leave it by itself without checking on it. I bring a big pot of salted water to a boil. Make sure the water is salty like the sea. Then I add the pasta and cook for just 2 to 4 minutes. Make sure to watch it closely. Once it floats and looks plump, it's usually done. I always taste a noodle, of course, just to be sure. If I'm not cooking it right away, I have 2 options really. Store it in the fridge for 3 to 4 days. I dust it with flour, portion it into little nests or piles, and keep it in an airtight container. Or option number 2, freeze it for longer storage. I spread it out on a baking sheet in a single layer, freeze it until it's solid, and then transfer it to a bag or a container, and it will keep in the freezer for up to 3 or 4 months. And you can cook it straight from frozen. Just add a minute or 2 to the boiling time. Both these options work really well. So if you want to get ahead of making meals, this is the way to do it. Here are 4 helpful tips that I've learned from making sourdough pasta. If you want even more flavor, use a whole wheat blend. Just keep in mind that those flours absorb more water so you'll likely need to adjust the water ratio a little bit. Tip number 2, don't skip the resting time. It's tempting to rush, but that long fermentation really deepens the flavor and improves the texture. Keep your workspace floured, but not too floured. Too much flour can actually make the pasta a little gummy when cooked. And finally, use your senses. Pasta dough should feel smooth and supple, not sticky or crumbly. Trust your hand more than your actual measurements. If you want to pair your pasta with a delicious sourdough loaf, click the video on the screen and I will see you next time.